I've been reading multiple books at the same time for almost 4 years. In fact, I first started talking about it here on YouTube in 2021. Since that video, I've been going strong, and in this video, I'm going to share why and how I do it so you can too. If you clicked on this video, you're probably looking for the how. How do you read multiple books at the same time without mixing stories up? How can you read multiple books at once and not forget everything you've read? Well, we'll get into that, but this part is perhaps even more important, the why. You're a reader, right? Or at least you want to fit more reading into your life. If that's the case, you probably also have multiple different genres or types of books you like to read. Maybe sometimes you're in the mood to read a deep and immersive fantasy. You know, for some escapism. Maybe sometimes you've got some energy and want to focus on learning, either working on yourself with a personal development book or to become more knowledgeable on a specific topic. Maybe you want to enjoy your comfort genre but also add in something different just for a change. All of this becomes very difficult when you're only reading one book at a time. If you're reading multiple books, however, you can have your cake and eat it too, switching between each read when you want to or you're in the right frame of mind. A good example of this is me right now. I'm currently reading 5 books, which honestly is a bit more than usual. 2 are fantasy, 1 is fantasy sci-fi, 1 is personal development, and the other is a book on writing. Essentially a learning book. Because I have these 5 different books, I can pick and choose between them depending on the mood I'm in. If I only had one book I was reading, say the personal development one, it might take me ages to get through it simply because I'm not always going to be in the right frame of mind to read it. Instead, I've spread myself out, making sure there's at least one book available to suit how I might be feeling. Basically, I'll enjoy reading more because I'm not forcing myself to read just one book I might not be in the mood for. So in summary, 1, it helps you read more by not forcing yourself to read more than one book when you're not in the mood. And 2, it helps you enjoy reading more because you're not forcing yourself to read one type of book when you're not in the mood. Honestly, there are probably other more psychological reasons for reading more than one book at the same time, but if what I just said doesn't convince you, the doing will. So let's get into that. The title of this video is how I read multiple books at once. So while I'm going to give you some tips and strategy, it is based on what I do. So tailor that to yourself. I said earlier that I'm currently reading 5 books at once, so let me show them to you. Book 1 is a physical book. It's a chill and easy fantasy that I can read essentially whenever. Book 2 is a fantasy sci-fi and I'm reading this as an ebook. Book 3 is another chill and easy fantasy. I'm reading this one as an audiobook. Book 4 is a physical book about personal development, and book 5 is a physical book about writing. My learning book. You can probably see what I've done here. 3 of the books on the list are physical books, 1 is an ebook, and 1 is an audiobook. I've done this because some of the books on my list are dependent on my mood, but some of them are dependent on the context. I typically listen to audiobooks while I'm doing chores, something creative, or walking somewhere. I read ebooks before bed, or if I'm traveling. The physical books I read at home. 2 books are context specific, audiobook and ebook. So I'll likely read them slower because I might not be reading them every day, or if I do, it won't be for long. The other 3 are mood specific. 1 is my everyday easy fantasy, another is personal development, so I have to be in the right frame of mind for that. And last is learning, so I definitely have to be in the right frame of mind for that. For you, this doesn't have to mean that you're reading 5 books at once. As I said, this is even a little more than usual for me. But I will always have at least 3 on the go at once. 1 physical, 1 ebook, and 1 audiobook. You could do the same. If you don't listen to audiobooks or have an e-reader, you could pick a couple of books that are mood specific instead of context specific, allowing you to have a book ready depending on the mood you're in. This might look like 3 physical books. 1 is an easygoing fiction, 1 is a little bit more intense fiction, and 1 is non-fiction. Or it could look like 1 ebook that's great for travel, 1 audiobook that's perfect for the car, and then 1 physical book you read at home. If you're looking to add more reading into your life, this is the perfect way to do it. Think about your life right now. How do you feel when you finish work? If you're exhausted, you might want to pick up a physical book that's easygoing and pick a more intense one for the weekends. Really get to know yourself and think about your routine right now, and then pick mood-specific or context-specific books to match. Now, you might have some questions, so I'm going to attempt to predict them and answer them. But if you have any more, ask them in the comments. Will it take me longer to read books this way? The only answer I can give to that question is it depends. If you're reading more books at the same time, then logically, yes, it would take you longer to read them all because you're spreading out your reading time. For example, my ebook takes ages to finish. On average, I probably take a month to read one book if I'm not traveling and instead just reading before bed. However, it could actually take less time to read all of these books if you're actually getting through them quicker because you're enjoying each of them more. You're not forcing yourself to read something you're not in the mood for, like we talked about earlier. Do you get lost or mixed up or forget things while reading multiple books at the same time? I have done this once and it was entirely my fault. I decided it would be a good idea to read one book on the Battle of Troy on my e-reader and another as a physical book. This obviously was a huge mistake because I got both stories completely mixed up all the time. They basically blended together. I fixed it by changing my ebook to something else fairly quickly. This is the only time that's happened. If you pick the right books for each mood or context, this won't happen to you. Unless you don't read one of them for months, then you'll probably forget stuff. Just make sure that you're likely going to read a little of each book fairly regularly and you'll be fine. The only other thing I'd say is be careful with genre books. I'm reading 2 easygoing fantasy right now, but one has dragons and the other has witches. They're different enough that they won't blend together. The same goes for world building. If you're reading multiple books with lots of characters, world building, and complicated politics, I think there is a limit to how much you can realistically remember. What if I don't have time to read just one book, let alone multiple? The only thing I can say to this is if you want to read more books, you have to make time to read more books. This method makes that easier because you're taking away a barrier. Instead of feeling frustrated and not in the mood for your current book, you have options. If you then don't choose to read any of them, then you're either not really enjoying the books, in which case you need to DNF them, and I have a video on that if you need more information, or you've just got to pick it up and get going. If time really is an issue, then audiobooks are a great addition to your life. You can slot them in whenever you're doing stuff that would usually involve listening to music or, your own mind. So if you're doing monotonous work or chores or walking somewhere, they're a great option. Essentially, it's worth taking a look at your current routines and seeing if you can slot reading in via audiobook, which is a whole topic all on its own. Doesn't reading more than one book at once cost a lot? It doesn't have to. You can either get books secondhand or from your library. You can even get audiobooks that way, so it's worth doing regardless. That should cover it, but I'd love to know from you, do you read multiple books at once? And if so, why? Leave me a comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time for another video.